All right, kitty cats. Meow meow. Shh. You quiet. My son is sitting here at the table, and he does not need to be participating in my live stream, at least this way. He could perhaps go on YouTube like everyone else and join StreamYard when I put out the link. All right, it's been a while. I have no idea when the last time I streamed was. It was probably over a week ago or something. I went for a trip, which was nice. I went on a little trip. Cassidy, good to see you. Mark, Chris, nice to see you all. Shalom. I like ting ting ting. I don't know what that means. I like greetings from other languages and other cultures. Like shalom, it's a nice greeting. Namaste. I don't know when I found out what namaste means, but the God to me bows to the God in you. That's pretty cool. So anyhow, I've been gone. My kids were just at a church camp all week, and I went with my wife for a trip to New York. I've never been, and that was pretty swell. Might make sure I just jumped out of the shower and make sure I don't have weird things on my face. And that was nice. You know, we got to life had been very busy up until just with the new job and up until that trip, and feeling a little stressful. So it was a little bit of a nice time for us to just hang out, have some good times together, spend some time together. And it was super. I got to meet our very own Alan with a Y, Allyn. And although it was brief, it was great. We had some coffee together. We hung out. I got to hug him. I got to feel his body with these hands. I'm also wearing this new silicone ring because my hand hurts from wearing my regular ring, I think. So I started wearing the silicone ring. So that was awesome. I got to meet Alan. One of the things that is really new, looks beautiful. Thanks, babe. I'm doing a thing, so don't come over here. On my way out, I did not yet have my next book club book, which I didn't even read the last one, but so I just read whatever I wanted to read. And so one of the things that my wife had gotten me for Christmas, thank you to Ted S. from the Arkansas Convivium, and I haven't seen Ted around for a while, so he's been busy, but Ted S. informed me, and I didn't know this priorly, that the movie Arrival, which I always love, is based on a short story from this guy, Ted Chiang, called The Story of Your Life. And so she got me for Christmas a bunch of his short stories, of which that one short story is in there, and I read that on the plane ride out to New York, and it is fantastic. And when we got back, my wife and I, because I've just been obsessing over it, my wife and I watched Arrival again, which she had previously seen but forgotten important points. And the story's way better than the movie. The movie's good, and the most important, meaningful points of the story, if you subtract out all the Hollywood nonsense that they added to it, is really wonderful. I was speaking a little bit. I might have a conversation with our very own. So one of the conversations that I've watched since today, I was just home doing a bunch of work, catching up on things, picking up the house, moving some things around. We're trying to rearrange some kids and do some different things like that. So as I was doing a bunch of that and laundry and dishes and whatever, what have you, I also have leftover pizza from pizza night last night. Grizz, good to see you here, my friend. What was I just saying? Distract myself. Yeah. Oh, the movie Arrival, all that Hollywood extra stuff. But the story itself is just fantastic. Oh, one of the things that I wrote in here is I've been catching up on some conversations this morning as I was running around. So C-Bax, old Christian Baxter, I listened. I finished up his conversation with Cassidy, which is always excellent. One of my longest running friends in the corner. And sorry about all the banging around. Hey, C-Bax, you are here. The writer that I am podcasting with on Monday references the author and Arrival. So that's fantastic. I'm very interested in Ted Chiang because Arrival's fantastic. Or I mean, The Story of You is fantastic. It's one of those things that after I read it, I'm just like, who is this person? I had the same experience. A lot of the pieces of art that have most moved me and affected me in my life after experiencing them, I'm just like, who is this person? I want to be around them. John Steinbeck is one of them, East of Eden. George MacDonald would be one, but he is past, memory eternal. Hopefully I'll get to see him someday, hang out with him. Terrence Malick's one. He's still alive. Probably never get to meet him. He's very private. And anyhow, like the story is just unbelievable. And so and it has deeply, there's a few things. So like there's a few things that have really shaped the way that I apprehend the world. Arrival is one of them, and this story even more so. It's better. The story is better. The Story of You. I think I put a community post on my channel where there's an audio reading of it that's already on YouTube because I was feeling like doing one myself because it's so good. Okay, but then back, Christian, to you. I was watching your conversation with Steven D20 or whatever it is. Dude, I'm such a fanboy groupie. You have no idea. I'm like, I don't know. All or nothing, man. It's O-Town, all or nothing at all. And so I was talking with, so I was watching this conversation with Steven, which is fantastic. Christian's conversation with Steven is really good. Steven's a guy that I've gotten to know through the corner a little bit, who's a really interesting guy. We'll maybe end up having a conversation about the story of your life. I don't know, because he told me, what did he tell me? I don't have my phone here, but he was telling me something that like the physics of light or some of the things that he said about light in that story are a little bit off because Steven's he's one of those guys. He's right brain, left brain is brilliant. If you listen to the story with, he gets into some of his story with Christian Baxter, but his dad is a physicist. His mom is an artist. And he really, in his own life, I mean, he's a winemaker and distiller. And so he tries to paint flavor pictures essentially. And the way that he talks about it is really good. And anyhow, it's really fascinating. So I'll maybe talk to him about the story of your life some. It came up in my conversation with Alan. Stephen is indeed cool. Grimm is a friend of Stephen. And Alan, some of the things that we were talking about while we were hanging out, I gave him my book. I was like, you have to read this. And yeah. William, good to see you. And rather hang out with Norm Macdonald than George MacDonald? I don't know. I mean, maybe Norm Macdonald would be cool to hang out with. Norm Macdonald is a really interesting guy, even when he talks about religion and other things. And Norm is, I don't know, I think he's a fascinating human being for sure. So Norm Macdonald would be cool to hang out with. But I don't know. George MacDonald is maybe the kind of person who wouldn't be cool to hang out with. I don't know. I don't always. There are certain artists that I like that I don't think I would want to be friends with. They're not. I don't know. There's a different. Human beings are interesting that way. Like I was saying that to my wife. Is there's a lot of people that I really appreciate and value and find very interesting, but I don't know that I'd want to hang out with them. I like silly people. Like if you don't have a decent sense of humor and you're not kind of silly, I mean, I can appreciate you in some aspects, but we're probably never going to become really close friends because I'm a silly boy. I'm a pretty silly Billy. Okay, what else? Both my kids, I have 2 children here at the table with me, and they are trying to be very good, and they are good, wonderful children. And they're trying to be quiet, but they are still distracting me because they are, in real life, physical fullness human beings here right in my presence that I'm ignoring to live stream. However, we've been hanging out and spending some time. One of my children was needing some introvert time anyhow after camp. And so I told them, you can have your introvert time this afternoon. And the other one I've been hanging out with quite a bit and is going to be leaving for a post church camp party thing. I don't know. They have such a great time at church camp, which is awesome. Joker Man. Isn't that a Dylan song? Doesn't he? Joker Man? What's that from? I don't know. Grog, you're here, my friend. With a spin, traveling the world of my creation, what we see will defy explanation. You dang right. Because the best things defy explanation. That's one of the things, Grog, thanks for reminding me. That's one of the things I want to touch on here is one of the things that the only thing that I think I listened to, and I didn't listen to all of it while I was on my trip, was the Eric Weinstein, Rogan, Terrence Howard conversation, the second part of the conversation. And there's a lot of it that I love. I think Eric Weinstein's the kind of person who I think I'd love to hang out with. Maybe both Weinsteins, but I like Eric a lot. He's very musical. He's very funny. He probably takes himself too seriously sometimes, but he still has a good sense of humor. And but he said something in that conversation that just was like quintessential to me about what was going on. Because a lot of that conversation, I was thinking right brain, left brain stuff. I was thinking Ian McGilchrist a lot. And I was thinking, and I think Eric was right about almost everything that he said. The areas where he was pushing back on Terrence Howard, I think are right. I think I'm very similar to Terrence Howard. I'm not nearly that brilliant scientifically. And I'm not that interested in science, but he's a very brilliant intuitor. And I think he sees things in patterns that he has difficulty explaining, and he makes errors in some of the precision of the things that he's saying. But to him, those are not as important because he's at a higher level where the detail is not that important to him. That's kind of how I roll typically. Like I don't care that much about precision that much. That's the whole point of the mosaic. It's just like I'll hit you with a bunch of different things, and if you focus on the precision, you'll lose the mosaic. The mosaic is what I care about. And Eric said at one point in there, he said, Terrence, he was very good. I want to say that I really appreciate the way that Eric handled it. And he said a lot of things that I agree with a whole bunch that are really, really good, particularly at the very beginning. But he said at one point in there when they were getting into the weeds a little bit that he said, Terrence, you always want to make the jump to what things mean, and we don't even know what they are yet. The implication being that he thinks that you need to understand what something is before you can say what it means. And I'm like, well, good luck, because none of us know what anything is. Not in the sense that Eric is talking about it. And I said some of this to Steven this morning. I was leaving him a message talking about it because what something is almost like it's that's the myth of modernity and the Enlightenment, is that you think you can understand what things are in an encapsulable way, and you can't, because everything is. This is my whole point of relational ontology, because everything's a relationship to the past and to the present and into the future. And causality isn't necessarily linear and just moving in unidirectional thing in a mechanistic, systematic way. And this is back to the story of your life, because and it's something that has come up a lot in the Little Corner Conversations. Vervaeke and Sam have talked about it. It's Sam's, perfect white polar bear. It's the Whitestone name. It's your telotic Aquinas final cause, which is pulling you into being from the future in as much as the past is pushing you into something, So anyhow, that's a little bit straw man for science, of course. No, there's a point in there. Science, this is the difference between science and scientism, though, which is brilliantly illustrated in that conversation because they play the clip from Neil deGrasse Tyson which I watched, where he responds to Terrence Howard in there. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, and they talk about this in the Eric Weinstein conversation. Neil deGrasse Tyson is being disingenuous because he's saying the way that all this stuff is worked out is through peer review and the journal system. Except the problem is two things he doesn't say. They've done studies on how many of those are reproducible, and not many of them are. And none of the funding goes to reproducibility studies. It goes into new research because the machine of capitalism is pushing that whole thing. And so I would say that's a corruption of the system of peer-reviewed journals of science. And also what Eric makes the point in that conversation, which I think is very valid, is that he knows very well that somebody who's outside of academia is never, you don't have any access to the peer-reviewed journals and to those conversations. And so it's a false appeal. Like, what is Terrence Howard going to publish all of a sudden? Like, it doesn't work. Risto, T-Rog's typically streaming on, or he's usually watching on my channel. So it's maybe not on Grail Country. It's maybe on my own channel. Yes, correct. All right. What else do I want to talk about before I open this sucker up? What other conversations were going on? Seabax and Emily had a great conversation about, I don't know. I had a lot of thoughts about modern evangelicalism and modern Christian worship stuff. And that was interesting. What was the other one, Seabax, that you had that I listened to? Stephen, Emily, and another one I'm forgetting. And then I've been working my way through Mark's conversation with Luke Freeman. And Luke's such a great guy. I mean, two sets of twins that are they 4 and under? Man, that is what a full life, man. That is unbelievable. And he's got like his master's in horticulture. He's doing all this farm, building his own farm and stuff. Luke Freeman is one of those guys I need to be in contact with for if the world just totally goes to shit, so I can, him or like Michael Martin or Sherry maybe, or somebody who's doing their own self-sustaining kind of farming community thing, because those are the only people who are going to know how to live if like the whole world just goes to shit. I'll survive more than some, but not as long as they will, probably. I can't remember what the other conversation was, but Mark also, I just want to say, God, Mark, you're such an asset to this community if you are still here, my friend, because you are, like, even what you were talking about with the bodhisattvas and stuff, that's such a thing. So, Mark, you definitely should talk to my friend Cal at some point. Except Cal is such a brilliant philosopher, logistician, actually, that he loves to talk about ideas so much that you miss just what a beautiful human being that he is. But he's a good friend of mine who reached out through watching Rando's conversations because he got really into, he was raised Hare Krishna, became an atheist for a long time, came back to Christianity through Christopher Langan, who is the guy who came up with the CTMU, the cognitive theoretical model of the universe. Yeah, CTMU, which has to do with like self-resolving paradoxes, and it's all like just hardcore logic. And Cal says he's going to be remembered as like one of the greatest philosophers, but probably posthumously. But he also, I don't know, he also has weird beliefs, like maybe eugenic kind of stuff. I'm not sure. I don't know. People that are really honest physicalists, and believe that morality is emergent, I think when they're consistent and honest, get into really weird ethical places. That's my general opinion with that. But Cal, so he's raised Hare Krishna. So you guys would have, a lot of times he'll tell stories of his youth that are really beautiful, but they're totally lost on me because it's all like Indian names and stuff. But we've often talked a lot about Christians being bodhisattvas. They are people who have refused enlightenment to stay here for love and for the sake of others. I mean, true Christians, which are those that are Christ to the world. So he's a great guy that you could talk to, but your conversation, a lot of things that you're saying, and I don't know, you're just a gem. So okay, I've probably. Oh, I could just tell a lot of stories too from New York that were wild. I'm gonna throw out the stream because then other people can come on and I can eat my pizza that I thought I was just gonna sit here and eat, but I talk too much. So going to the comedy shows was fun. It was a really good time. There's a lot of we sat front row at a comedy show once, which was a little bit scary for me because I don't really want. I'm a little bit more fine with being a look at me, but my wife doesn't necessarily want to like. She's not like she's quieter and she's not like oh, I want to engage with this comedian if they start talking to us and wanting to use us as fodder for their set, which happened. And this one, he seemed like a wonderful human being. By the way, there's so many gay men in New York City. It's unbelievable. I feel like half the men in New York are gay. And there's just a lot of gay men. And we also happen to be there. Maybe this is why we also happen to be there at the tail end of a huge pride parade thing. So there was just, and we accidentally got caught up in the pride parade one night when we were going out because we were going to, what is it, Washington Park or something in Lower Manhattan by the NYU campus. And we were going to go just walk through there. And it was like there was this huge parade. I don't know. It was terrifying. And what's over my right shoulder? This shoulder? A door to my porch? To a back porch? You can't see it. It's too bright out there. The stone table make it. I don't know what you're talking about. Grim, what are you talking about? Did someone at the table make that, or is that your left shoulder and your broadcast is reversed? So okay, these are pictures by some of my children. This is a paper. I love this picture. This is a paper. It's a bunch of different pieces of construction paper put together this is my daughter when she's old. I think this is what that is, which is really great and wonderful. This over here is the neighborhoods of Minneapolis. It's a picture of the neighborhoods of Minneapolis. And this is some old-fashioned curtains so we are only the second. Hey, Mark. We are the second owners of this home in Minneapolis proper. And they're these awesome, really old curtains that are on all the windows in our main floor that are really heavy and cool. And our kids ripped them and broke them, which I'm very sad about. But we still keep them because, like, these curtains now, if you tried to buy these curtains now, they'd be like, I don't know, $50,000 or something ridiculous. You know, I mean, my wife and I went shopping once for blinds for our bedroom, and I'm a hippie naturalist that just like doesn't want a bunch of cheap plastic crap. So we were gonna get like nice draperies and curtains for our bedroom, and then we got the estimate or whatever it was gonna be, and we're like, never mind, we're not getting curtains for our bedroom. Just kidding. So, what's up, Mark? I can't hear you.
I had to find my arrow to unmute myself.
Okay.
No, it's I'm just happy to see you. It's been too long. So you got to go to New York among your other adventures?
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like a bit of an episode from Seinfeld getting lost in the gay pride parade or something.
Oh my gosh. It was overwhelming. It was just like a lot of people
Well, New York's like that anyway.
Like fishnets who probably shouldn't be. And it was just glitter everywhere. And I don't know. It's kind of funny because you go through all these different iterations of the LGBTQ movement and like first wave, the old school, like I think of Camille Paglia or something, like old school gays, old school trans, who would look at something like this pride parade and just be like, this is like a gratuitous capitalist, ridiculous thing that I want nothing to do with. So I don't know. It felt there, and there were police everywhere. It felt a little unsettling. Like violence was just like always just like right below the surface
I
of
think
it.
they're probably afraid of one of those scenes where somebody drives a car into the crowd or something.
Yeah,
Because you have that. You just need one crazy, right?
yeah. So it was a little wild, but it was also I don't know, it was fun. Going to live comedy shows in New York was really fun. Um, we were able to go to the Comedy Cellar, which is like a iconic place in the world of comedy, and we were able to just to get in on like standby tickets because we didn't have tickets in advance. We were kind of just winging it, and it was pretty fantastic. Um, I'm having questions from my local community here. We did. The question was, did we see any musicals? And no, we did not see any musicals.
Oh, it was just you and your wife were there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's nice. That's
Yeah, so it was
good.
great. My kids were all at church camp for the whole week. So then we had
Oh,
like
right. Nice. Yes, good.
time to
Very
ourselves.
important. Very important.
Yeah, which
Nice.
was lovely. So we just did a lot of walk around. The only really I didn't want to do a bunch of touristy stuff because it just ends up feeling like, yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be really cool and sometimes you should, but it just feels like on vacation, I don't want to feel like there's things that I have to do,
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I just want to hang out.
Plus, you don't like the canned experience anyway.
Yes,
And my
exactly.
guess is you want the locals experience,
Yes,
the regulars. Yes,
exactly.
you want to eat where the locals eat.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
if you have any brains at all and you're in the Southwest, that's definitely how you want to eat. I don't know. And New York, when I was there, that was definitely the way to go. Avoid the tourist traps.
Yeah.
Go where the locals go. Yep. Yeah.
Well, the pizza that we had there, it's this place. I should find it. It's the only pizza we had. I just want to try New York pizza. It's called. It's probably Italian. I'm guessing, but it's like the industry in something L apostrophe industry whatever something.
Okay.
And there's a spot in Brooklyn, but then there's also one in Manhattan. I mean, it's fantastic. It
Knock
probably
your
is the
socks
best
off.
pizza I've ever had.
I was surprised when I went to a conference last year in November in Raleigh, North Carolina, and there was a little in a strip mall New York pizza place, and it turned out to be the best pizza I'd ever had in Raleigh, North Carolina. Blew my socks off. Can't remember what it's called. Oh, good question. I never traveled around because I only went to the conference, so I didn't get any time outside of the hotel and then the mall that was strip center that was adjacent to it. But unfortunately, I want to go back to Riley. It's really, what I saw was beautiful. The country, everything's beautiful and green. It was hilly, not mountainous.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the best donut I've ever had is right outside of Asheville, North Carolina. So McMo is down there somewhere in that vicinity, and I have other friends from the corner that are down there. So I think McMo lives in Asheville or around.
I could probably look it up if I paid with my card. I could probably dig out at some point the name of the place because I probably should.
Yeah.
Find it. It's near the Embassy Suites, I think, in that area.
McMo's here. So it's called Hole is the donut place that I liked.
On a heavy duty philosophical topic, are you open to to discussion on that? I'm debating whether or not I should or shouldn't call myself a monotheist. I'm really not happy with that term. It feels imposed upon me.
Sure.
And it isn't necessarily biblical because it is. I mean, you could say the idea is there. I can understand that logic, but like the word Trinity, it's an external imposition by later philosophical thinkers.
Yeah.
Maybe T-Grog could get in on this and talk some sense into me because I really don't think I am a monotheist. If anything, I would still stick with the Buddhist descriptor non-theist.
Yeah,
but spinning in a different direction than they do.
I do like that because when I finally figured through, I guess, I mean, I learned this through Vervaeke. I don't know why I didn't, but I mean, essentially, non-theism is a proper way of understanding, I think, what would be thought of as the God of the philosophers through a Christian understanding of the incarnation. Because the kind of God, I mean, this is what I would say, and I mean, and I'm learning about Judaism, but this is what I've often said to Sam in our conversations about the Trinity, is that kind of the monotheism that they're conveying, when you don't have an understanding of the incarnation, which is this, it's where there is no loss between representation and transcendence. I mean, that's truly what the incarnation is about. Then it turns into a kind of non-theism that's completely inaccessible to you. Like whatever you're referring to as God in a monotheistic kind of way that doesn't have a Trinitarian relation that is tethering that to your lived reality, that God doesn't exist.
Well,
Might as well not exist.
John chapter 17. How do you read John chapter 17 from a strict monotheistic point of view? Father, you and I are one. Make them one with me as I am one with you.
Yeah.
I mean, and then it's hard. It seems like it's very much an attempt to corral God.
Yes. Have you ever heard the term monolatry?
Yes.
So like I think that's a very Christian or Jewish idea that you should worship one God. But it's not, but then I think I heard of that term first through, I can't remember who it was. It was through the work of like Michael Heiser, but it's kind of the Lord of Spirits idea. It's that Christianity doesn't believe in just one God. They believe in tons of gods. You know, there's tons of gods, like the whole pantheon and Job and Lord of Spirits and like the heavenly host.
That's how Pageau talks about Gabriel and Michael. You know, they're faces of God is how he kind of speaks of them. Yeah.
And so I do think it's right to worship God, but then all that becomes really complicated because I sent one way that I'll go into what you're talking about is so Rogan had on Sebastian Junger recently, and in that he goes into his most explicit, probably religious section for a while. I've heard him talk about his grandfather before and his grandparents, but he talks about his grandfather who he loved a lot and whose wife, you know, was really sick with dementia, and he lived with him for a while in New Jersey, and he goes into this story and he becomes emotional, and he's talking about how he uses that as a way to talk about his belief in the soul. Like when his grandfather died, like he's not there anymore. And he's like, a lot of people have seen dead bodies and whoever you loved is just no longer there.
Right.
And then he goes on to talk about God and a lot of other things. And what he says, and these are conversations we've had in the corner over and over and over for years, because I've always been really big on this term panentheism, which is a term that Orthodox have used forever, and it's but like Paul, I used to give him crap for years. He'll talk about it now because like he would just never say it, and I would keep just being like panentheism. He's like, Luke, I'm not using your words. And but like the line between panentheism and pantheism, and like what Rogan was saying there is complicated, because Rogan went into what Rogan basically said. This is coming through my filter and my words, but he basically said that what a human being is like a receptor for consciousness. And given the constraints of all of our life and our biology and our situations and our situatedness, all these different things that influence us, that is what consciousness looks like manifested through this particular iteration. And so what he's essentially saying is like, you are the representation of God given your constraints. And he said like, or you could say consciousness or whatever, but he's like, and so like I am you, but just with different constraints put upon me. But he was essentially spouting mysticism, you know, more or less. And but that always gets difficult. I was telling you about Cal earlier. I should try to like text him and see if he's available to get on here, because he we've talked about this so much, and the further along I've gone, I think when you really emphasize the doctrine of the incarnation, it almost pushes you. And again, it's like, what do you mean by that? More towards almost like a pantheism than even a panentheism, because this is where we've came. Because panentheism seems to stress the transcendence of God,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, you are within God, but God is somehow still without. Like everything exists within God, for sure. But then pantheism is almost more stressing the immanence of God, which is like God is everywhere present, filling all things, and it's
Right.
and I don't know. I think the doctrine of the incarnation kind of leads that way. Is that's what, without diminishment,
Well,
this is
the
God.
church fathers were so obsessed with getting rid of bad doctrine. It seems like in the process they became heresy hunters and just eliminated absolutely everything they possibly could
Sure.
until they kind of painted themselves into a corner where they're like. I was listening to Jacob's first discussion with Father Stephen when he made his first appearance on Jacob's channel, and the the acrobatics he was engaged in to try to explain the Trinity in a way that wouldn't offend his Jewish host
Hmm.
was just was kind of funny. But this is what we do to ourselves, or we have done to ourselves as a religious as a religion, broadly speaking, or at least orthodoxy has. That there is some bit of nonsense to it, and that may be the beauty of it, is that enjoy it as a Zen koan, but as something to truly hang your hat on. It's pretty tricky business without ending up labeled a heretic. But if you're willing to let go of all that and dance in some of the ideas that you're just doing, I think it can be more satisfying and productive, possibly even,
Yeah.
if I may dare say that.
Well, and I think that it's an acknowledgement that it's my favorite George MacDonald Lilith quote. The fact is, no man understands anything, and it's kind of how Jordan Daniel Wood, when he's talking about this and this Christ consciousness and Maximus, he'll often say, he used the illustration of his wife, where, and this is all stuff that people know intuitively, is that you can be married to your wife for 20, 30, 40 years, and PVK will say this sometimes about his wife, and sometimes she'll do something where you're just like, where it's a complete, like, does not compute, what is going on here, and you feel like, do I even know this woman at all? And so it's not that, it's like, but that doesn't mean, and you couldn't ever describe your wife in a way outside of poetry that would encapsulate who she is.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't propositionally describe your wife if you had infinite words to describe who she is. But does that mean that you don't know her? No, of course you know her.
Right.
Of course. But that's the same with the knowledge of God.
Right.
And if you focus on a personalist, this is one of the aspects I want to touch on it, on a personalist aspect of knowing versus a definitional one, then it becomes simple and obvious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that came out to me when I was talking to Luke Freeman. When I was listening to the Louise Perry, Elizabeth Oldfield discussion, and she gave me the phrase "happy clappy," and that to me is like, yeah, that's it. That's the kind of Christian I am. Now, her idea of happy clappy was maybe was something maybe I wouldn't necessarily be embodying, but it was. But yeah, no, that's definitely that's the place to be. I find myself getting depressed the more I dialogue in deep theological waters, because it can, the back and forth starts to feel oppressive, and like you said, it strips the relationship from the experience and makes it all words, and you have to have the words right. Even to the point I felt that way listening a bit to Chad's discussion with Tunji, who's very, very, very conservative theologically, and he doesn't see how you can be open to a God of your understanding, and versus encourage people to pursue a God of their own understanding and not pursue Jesus Christ, since Jesus Christ is the optimum path, right? And that to me is like, that pinches. It's like a bad suit. It just chafes.
Yeah. So, to roll with what you were saying, so I think it'll help to answer this question, which I can riff on a little bit, but also one of the things that I was thinking about bringing into the stream, but I couldn't find it yet, and I couldn't clarify it with my local friend first, but the way, like a big difference between what evolved and how we know things properly, and I don't know. And you'll find exceptions to this whole rule, but between Eastern and Western Christianity is, in the East, they had what's known as the patristic ordo, which is it's essentially like the epistemology of the East. And it was, and they said, I'll forget all the exact terms, but it was essentially like you reason from the person to the characteristics or something of the person, the things that you can infer or deduce from the person, and then you can reason out into like principles or something to apply more broadly. Whereas the West almost inverted that. The West is almost the complete opposite. It's like first principles. What are the principles that we argue from first? And then you argue from principles to patterns, and then you apply that to persons. But the East is almost complete inverse of this. And so, like T. Grogan says here, how does personalist knowledge differ from empirical knowledge? Well, this is where I think, so like empiricism, true radical empiricism, which is just like observations, if you don't map that onto like a left-brained understanding of it, it's just phenomenology. Babies have pure empiricism, but they're not mapping that to scientific understandings of what those observations mean. Like, that's the difference between empiricism and science. Scientism is telling you what all these observations mean. Just the pure observation is just phenomenology. It's just experience. But that doesn't tell you anything in a systematic way. It's just what you're perceiving.
Well, and in a baby, what's happening is really complicated. What a baby is, like you say, is encountering the world. They are very empirical little creatures. They're trying this, tasting that, putting things they shouldn't in their mouth. I mean, everything is just to be experienced.
Yeah, what is that?
And it's it's actually changing their brain it's forming neurological pathways in a dynamic way. And if they're not allowed to do that, it actually will retard their development and permanently affect them.
Yeah.
If it's allowed to last too long, like we found in those orphans who were basically caged in their cribs in Romania during Ceausescu, and the revolution happened in 89, 90, and it was overthrown, and people discovered these enormous orphanages of children who were just all they were fed, cleaned, and they left to live in a Skinner box, essentially, just this horrible sort of experience, and they permanently harmed by that. Many of them, if not all of them. I don't know if I've ever been a study on a large scale of them, but I know it was quite tragic. I'll stop talking. Thank you. But that's good seeing you, Luke.
Yeah, hey, no, you're fine. Chad, what up?
What up, homies? What up? What up? What up? What up? I just thought I'd stop in and say hello. Finally, somebody else is streaming for once.
I know, man.
Feedbacks did one. Mark did a few.
Mm-hmm. No,
you're doing your mornings.
Yep, doing the morning stuff. Well, I had this week off quite a bit, and I was like kind of manically, out of boredom, I was doing some streaming, so that was fun.
Listen, you got time,
Buckaroo.
So here, okay. But your wife through empiricism. Yeah, again, Grog. If you're going to say radical empiricism, that's everyone knows everything through their perception.
Wow, I would never call that. Say I know my wife empirically.
But I think this is where people say empiricism, and what they mean,
Yeah,
I think,
define
and
it.
what they mean is scientism. And empiricism is not scientism. This is like, I would say, go watch Firas Hobby debates Joe Rogan on science. And Firas Hobby tries to make this point repeatedly to Rogan, and Rogan can't understand what he's saying. And he uses the illustration of like flipping a coin. And he asks Rogan, like, if you flip a coin, and he's like, what is the percentage? What are the chances that it will be heads or tails? And Rogan, like a smart 8th grader or whatever, says 50-50. But he's like, well, there's a small chance it could land on its edge, And so he's like, it's not exactly 50-50, it's whatever. And he says, okay, sure. But he's like, what if, but then Firas Hobby says, what if you had never seen anyone ever flip a coin before? You didn't know what a coin was. You didn't know anything about it. And then you watch somebody flip a coin and it turns into a butterfly. And he's just like, and if you had never seen that before, like a child, and then somebody did it again, you just be like, oh, that's interesting. When you flip this thing called a coin, it turns into a butterfly. And then pretty soon, like that, this is the difference between empiricism and scientism, is like empiricism is just seeing the coin flip, and then whatever happens, happens. When you flip the coin repeatedly and you say it's going to be 50-50, be heads or tails, and you start applying faith that the future will behave like the past, and you map these systems onto it, you're no longer in empiricism. That's science. That's scientism. And so I agree with you. Empiricism just means phenomenology. It just means experience. It just means what you see. This is why I've always liked Barfield, because Barfield is just talking about perception. He's not talking about all the bullshit that happens after perception. He's just talking about perception.
It just seems like even at that level, do I just know my wife? I'd have to really meditate on this. Do I know my wife just through experience alone? I feel like I know my wife beyond it in a deeper. We've been at it now for 33 years. And it's just, I know her, in some ways, I feel like I know her better than myself, almost, I could say.
Yeah, I can relate to
and
that.
I can't give you an empirical explanation for that. You know what I'm saying? I think you understood. I could, from what I heard some affirmation, but but you're back into the range, into the realm of poetry. More than, that's for art. Maybe that's the point. And maybe that's where religion and art converge at its best, anyway.
What are we talking about?
We were answering T-Grog.
Well, we're engaging with T-Grog on some...
But you know your wife through empiricism, he says. You are obfuscating many red herrings.
Yeah.
We were ignoring the obfuscating part, but
why are we interested in what T-Grog has to say?
Well, we don't have to. I mean, it's
no, we can't be. But I'm just wondering, like, questions I want to ask T-Grog about. He won't email me back, but because I did invite him on the show, but I am interested in, like, what is the gold standard of reality for him? What does that mean? And has he examined his own prejudices? And those are some questions I would like to know.
Hey, Grog, we know you're here. What are you doing this fine Saturday afternoon? I'll put out the invite again. Just get in here. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I have to. I'm about ready to go to this really great event. There's going to be about probably 300 or 400 sober drunks there. There's going to be a bonfire. There's going to be a speaker, a band, a huge barbecue, and probably some volleyball. We're going to take the dogs, and it'll be fun. Looking forward to that.
Cool.
That sounds great.
The old summer smash at the barn.
Summer smash. There were some. I'm trying to think of what the name of. We saw a couple bars in New York that I just thought were so I mean, they were funny names, but I was like also just sad. Like one of them, I think one of the bars was called Off the Wagon. I was like, what a sad name for a bar. Or oh man, what was another one? They were just terrible ones. They were basically just like admitting, like, whatever, we quit.
I like. You ever go to the Stumble Inn?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, like names like that are pretty cool. So this place is a barn. It was a property that was a foreclosure that was completely shit when they got the foreclosure.
Mm-hmm.
Dude who when they it was sight on scene. So like if you wanted to put a bid in on it, you couldn't look inside. But he was a roofer, and he's like, he looked at the roof, and he's like, wow, the roof is good. And like this,
Not leaking water, yeah.
Yeah, it was like riddled with trash all over the joint. So they put the bid in, they got the place, and like a couple weeks later, they invited some friends out to clean it up. They made a flyer, and over like 100 people came throughout the weekend to clean the place up. They cleaned out like 10 dumpsters worth of crap. And since then, they've had meetings there and camping events and stuff like that on their property. So it's pretty cool.
Nice.
Hello, Mr. Tim.
Hey.
How are you?
Hello.
Fantastic. Always fun to listen in. Yeah, I'm glad you guys are doing well.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
I'm certainly am. I'm sorry I missed your email, Chad.
Oh, it's okay.
By the way, my daughter just celebrated 11 years clean and sober. So
wonderful.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's
I'm
beautiful.
just thinking about all those kids that didn't make it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they couldn't or wouldn't. It's hard to say which one it is.
Well,
the line between those is tough.
Yep.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I happen to think alcohol and addictive behaviors are highly genetically loaded. So
for some, yes.
Well, I had 3 alcoholic grandparents, 2 alcoholic parents. Completely skipped me. I never liked drinking, and I never liked drugs. Just didn't do anything for me.
Yeah,
probably because I'm such a mean person.
You're not mean.
We all have our vices.
Now, wait a minute. I warn people. I am an agent of Satan, so beware.
Okay.
I will shake your.
I'm wearing my coat of many colors to protect myself.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. There, I have the Pope right there.
There you go. There's the anti-Pope.
Which Pope is he? Is that the recent one or the old one?
That looks like Francis.
That's Francis. That's all right.
Oh, hi.
I'm a big believer in Satan. I mean, I took part in a conversation called "The Redemption of the Fallen Angels." So, I'm a big believer in Satan's just. Well, there's some AA line I think about the devil.
Luke, how many people are in your church? I don't.
Mine?
Yeah. How many people go to your church?
So, I go to a big church.
So
I go to the church that's kind of the crown jewel of the Orthodox Church in America. I think it's the origin of it.
What city?
Minneapolis.
I'm not worried about Satan, guys.
They got you teaching Sunday school there yet, or?
Nope.
I didn't think
so.
so.
I have not yet. I have not volunteered for that yet. They probably let me. I mean, this is the thing. Like all this, I've done this with so I have a local buddy who's a deacon, who's been to seminary, who's a good friend, who grew up in South Dakota. So we have that overlap. So that's kind of fun. And we have we're similar ages, similar kids, all that stuff. And there'll be times when I say things online, I'll send it to him, or there people be really critical of me, like Anselman or yourself, and I'll send him stuff. And he's like,
well, I'm critical of your ideas. I don't think you're a bad guy. I think that, I mean, it's like me saying, I want to join the Mormon church, but I don't believe Joseph Smith is a prophet. I mean, it's like, well, I'm sorry. You can't be a member of the church unless you think Joseph Smith's a prophet. So I read the ecumenical count. By the way, I'm an atheist. I'm a physicalist. but I'm interested in intellectual history.
Yeah.
We have councils that Orthodox accept as binding.
I got a question.
On all believers. And you're just like, well, whatever, the council, who cares about that? Like,
we're all Americans here, T-Grog. That's the thing.
I understand that.
They came over here and planted a church here, so they're going to get Americanized one way or the other. It's on them if they don't like it.
It's like, oh, well, I guess, I mean, there are certain things supposedly that Christians are supposed to, have, believe. But it's like, yeah, Chad, what is it?
I have a question for the physicalist.
Yes, sir.
Okay, because I haven't figured this out, and I'm not.
By the way, don't quote me as an authority. I'm not Jonathan Peugeot. I'm not Jordan Peterson. I'm not John Vervaeke. I'm not a guru. I'm not an expert on these things. I don't claim to be an expert on everything, but I'll try to answer your question.
I heard that in such a Trump voice. I'm not Jonathan Peugeot.
I'm just saying, these guys are world experts on everything. But
Chad, go ahead, Chad.
Well, I was just wondering, what? Let's see. The first question is, how does how does a seed go from a seed and turn into a blade of grass? Like, what is that?
Well, it's called development. It's called, in mammals, which I'm more familiar with. I was never a big plant guy, but it's embryological development. Certain genes turn on, certain genes turn off. It's very complicated. It's a matter of ongoing study. It's very complex. And the only way we're going to find out how it works is science. That's it. Not armchair speculation. We have to do experiments and figure it out.
Well, I was just wondering because I don't know. I don't know how it works either. I don't think actually anybody knows how it works. I don't think
we know some things.
Well, we know like the processes, right?
We know some things, but it's very complicated. It took billions and billions of years to evolve. So it's a mess. It's not straightforward. It's, developmental biology is a whole huge sub area in biology. It's very complicated.
Okay. Second question is,
yes, sir.
Is like, what for you is the gold standard of reality?
Well, it depends on reality in the sense of what everything is. I would say that our best shot at understanding reality is through scientific methods. Now, we don't know what the bedrock of reality is. It's an ongoing study. I would just say that, first we thought it was atomic. Then we talked about, quarks, leptons, but now they talk about quantum fields. So it's undefined right now. I think the best theoretical structure we have to describe reality, from what I understand, is quantum field theory. So there are fields, and they generate reality.
Which is more important, the things we know or the things we don't know?
Well, I think there's many more things we don't know than things that we do know. I'd say we live in an.
I wish I could stay.
It's like a person in the Sahara Desert, and you pick up one grain of sand, and I say, well, I know everything about the desert. Modern science, at least it's in the form we practice it today, has only been around about 400 years. So, you gotta cut us some slack here. On the other hand, theology has been around for a lot longer than that, and nobody can even figure out anything. So
what's the goal of good science?
I would say the goal of good science should be, well, first of all, knowledge. And also, along with that, an ancillary goal from my perspective should be human well-being. Human well-being. You know, back in the old days, we used to take people who are mentally ill. We used to put them in insane asylums, douse them with freezing water, put them in cages. You know, so now we have antipsychotic drugs. I have relatives who are on antipsychotic drugs. Back in the bad old days, those people would have been locked up in asylums.
But that was science, right?
Well, that was the science of the day. Yeah, I understand that. That's true. That's true. Yeah, I would say that's correct. Science makes progress like morality makes progress. You know, 300 years ago, you know, or 1,000 years ago, everybody would have said, well, you know, killing homosexuals is great, you know, burning witches.
Well, or even 80 or 100 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, so it's an ongoing process. It's not perfect, but to claim that something has to be perfect or it's no good is absurd to me. It's absurd. I hear Paul Vanderkamp talk about this all the time. He's going, well, you know, there's a combinatorial explosion and nobody knows anything. And it's like, whoa, baby. It's like, it's such a red herring.
Well, I think Paul, in fairness to Paul, what he's talking about is people's ability to cope with the massive influx of information that they're getting as a result of the internet, mass media, social media, etc. That is not. That explosiveness he's referencing is, and then the growth of knowledge, the exponential growth of knowledge. All of that and our ability to process it is overwhelming us emotionally and psychologically, and driving us to despair because we can't integrate it into our personal experience. And I don't think that's a red herring at all.
If that's what he means, then forget what I just said. If that's what he means, okay. But a lot of times I don't understand what he means. So, but to think I cannot identify this as a cup unless I have a value structure, that requires an argument. That requires an argument.
Can you have an implicit value structure?
An assertion that, well, in order
you don't need
a cup.
You don't need to be a Neoplatonist to use the cup.
No,
right?
But in order to use the cup, you do have to have an implicit value structure. It'd be like the same as having a smartphone, and you bring someone, let's say you have a time machine, and you bring someone from 500 years ago to the current age, and you give them a cell phone, it means nothing to them. It's a rock.
Well, isn't that just trivially true, though? That's just trivially true. Okay, now if you don't know what it is, then yeah. But to say it's a value structure, that seems to be a different argument.
But why does a value structure have to be abstract?
I don't know what it is. Okay. I don't think you need a value structure to identify things. I don't think that's true. I think that requires an argument. It's not just something that's self-evident to me.
But I'd say there's a lot of things that we use and value that we can't articulate any sort of truth about.
That may be true, but you got to remember, a lot of our life, because of science, we know this, not because of mystics, is based because the brain, our self, the machinations of our mind inside our heads are transparent to us. In other words, we can't see what's going on, right? We just we experience my hands. I experience looking at this screen. I don't experience what's going on in my optical cortex, all right? So I would say that science has taught us a lot about how the brain functions, and we're learning more about that all the time. And, I just don't see any alternative to that. I don't see. Now, by the way, people say, well, I love my wife and I don't need science. Well, I understand that, but I think you need an empirical basis for knowing your wife's not cheating on you, knowing that your wife loves you. How do you know your wife loves you? Because she says she loves you. You hear it with your ears. You feel her embrace.
Well, trust, right? Because she could do all those things, and if you don't trust her, it doesn't matter.
You see the beautiful meal she's preparing. That's evidence that she loves you. That's evidence.
But you could have all those same phenomena, and if you don't trust that any of it's real, you're not going to feel the love.
Well, that's true. And people can have strokes and then they don't trust anybody, or get Alzheimer's, and because of the changes in their brain, they don't recognize people. They hate them. They think they're devils. Yeah.
Grog, do I know, how did you come to this space? How did you discover TLC? How did you end up here?
I don't know. I'm retired.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
do you remember how you?
I have an abiding interest in intellectual history. Right. Mm-hmm. I have an abiding and deep interest in intellectual history. As a matter of fact, I'm reading a book right now that Paul Vanderklay recommended. And by the way, I recommend everybody read it. It's called They Flew.
Yeah. I knew you were reading that. Yeah.
At first, I thought I was going to throw up when I started reading it, because it's so outrageous and insane what people believe. Mm-hmm. But actually, it's one. And this is the irony of it. Here's a guy who's a Protestant minister, a Reformed Protestant minister. He's recommending this book, and it's a total slam on Protestantism from end.
That's why Paul's great.
Huh?
That's why Paul's great.
It's like, doesn't he believe what he's preaching? Why is he a Protestant? Why is he recommending this book? It's like, read the
I think it's complicated. I think he said that.
Huh?
I think he's talked about that. He's at least a third generation minister in the Christian Reformed Church.
Okay, so that's okay.
All right. He's talked about sincerity versus authenticity and prophilicity. That's at least a huge play on sincerity. It's what he's been given.
Well, as an alternate hypothesis, I would like to say that having been an employee, you have to kind of adjust your sales to your employer, right? So what would he do if he got thrown out of the CRC? What would he do? I mean,
he told us he'd probably go down the charismatic church down the street, or a black church. He said,
"Yeah, I've told
that's where he'd be happiest."
Listen, Mark, I've told him how to grow his church: healing services, speaking in tongues, prophecies. You'll pack them in. I guarantee it. I guarantee. I could do it. When I was a Baptist, I used to preach. I used to preach all the time. Down City Mission, and it's not hard.
I don't think he's worried about growing his church as much as he is in being faithful as he sees it, I think.
Well, no, I'm sure Paul's a nice guy. He's helping these poor people. I get that. I get it. That's fine. I get it. I get that. I do. But here's what I don't like. And it's not you. It's not, no offense.
Lay it on us. We can handle it
this way. Most people do. I refuse to believe things to make myself feel good. I absolutely refuse. Unless there's evidence, and for supernatural claims, I need very strong evidence, because there's so many claims. There's claims everywhere. UFO abductions, Bigfoot.
There's evidence everywhere too.
Virgin Mary's appearing, Lady of Guadalupe.
No, all you have in the end is your body, your mind, your ability to take in what you encounter in this lifetime. right? I agree.
Yeah, but I look for it. I actually search for supernatural experiences. Now, I haven't taken mushrooms yet. Okay. I've thought
That
about
could
it.
be an interesting. Yeah, if you don't, I wouldn't. I don't do it. I wouldn't do it because I'm type 2 bipolar. So that would. I don't want to take that
I have
chance.
relatives that are type 2 bipolar too. So
okay, well, I am it. I've lived it, and I'm also treatment resistant. So I have to know how to. It's taken me half of a lifetime to learn how to ride these waves. Anyway, so I wouldn't do it.
well, God
But
bless
I've
you,
heard
that's a hard one. That's hard.
it's fun. It's a ride, but
Whatever gods there are, bless Mark.
That's it. That's part of why I'm here. One thing I would say is, it seems like a lot of what you say is very linguistically and culturally conditioned.
Of course.
And so your view and your way of interpreting the world, we're blind to it because we are all Western. So what you're saying very much appeals to the Western mind. And we can't see past, for example, the germ theory of disease. We just can't see past it. It's part of our experience. And so, in a sense, from the discovery of that to this day, for those of us who grew up in this culture, we can't imagine the possibility or it's extremely hard for us to imagine the possibility of an extraordinary healing that isn't scientifically explainable. However, imagine you're a Piroha in the Amazon. It's a tiny little tribe that's been being studied to death probably at this point, who have, for example, no words for math that allow them to engage. They have no numbers in their language. Can you even imagine functioning in their world? Just as they can't, they've tried. They've taught them English. They've taught them how to read English. Even can they teach them math? They can't. Now, not at least now maybe second, third. If you took, I don't think they've ever taken children out of, because we have modern ethics. We don't take these children out and move them into modern. You probably could take a third generation Piraha and raise them amongst Westerners and teach them math. But the ones that, as I understand it, have been taught English and brought out of actually introduced to math, can't be taught math. Can't be taught 2 + 2 = 4 to save their lives. Yet these people could run rings around us in their environment.
Sure,
and they see things that we don't see. They see gods in the forest that we don't see. And who's blind? In their world, we're the blind ones. Flip it around. Put them in our world. They're the blind ones. They're the dysfunctional, the handicapped. And so what I would encourage you, knowing I didn't know you started out Baptist, I must have missed that part of your story at some point.
I've been a charismatic and I've been a Baptist.
Okay, so you've been the whole routine, and so you've got good reason. There's a lot of good reasons to not be there's a lot of good reasons to be a former charismatic and a former Baptist. Okay,
and a Calvinist.
And I've been them both. I've never really been a hardline Calvinist, but I've been both. And I've returned. I'm still, like I was telling Luke, I feel pretty good just saying I'm happy clappy. I like that. That's the kind of Christian I am at the moment. But
that's good. That's fine.
That works for me. What I would, though, with that framing in place, imagining, with the understanding that your worldview is heavily conditioned, consider the possibility that instead of reading the Bible top down, as a book of commands that God dictated to us, that it was a bottom-up writing process. It is a 1,000 to 1,500-year-old document that was drafted over a period of time, and that was about the engagement of people with God, documenting their experiences, and it was a progressive. It's a progressive revelation, but not from the top down, but from the bottom up. It's from their experiences. And if you read it from that perspective, from the bottom up, I think it can break through some of the conditioning, and you might find yourself maybe I wouldn't say I'm not going to try to convert you. I'm just saying
no,
you might give you a more sympathetic view to why I've come through to becoming a happy clappy Christian, or and maybe not be so resistant to the possibility that God, whatever and wherever that he, she, it is a possibility, and that there could be something to this thing we do.
Well, yeah, I'm an agnostic atheist. In other words, I don't discount that there could be some mind, I don't know how that would work, behind the universe, but that specific expressions of it that I've been able to study in depth, like Mormonism or some versions of Christianity. I mean, there's no one version of Christianity. They seem to be fraudulent at the base, and so I just, I used to tell people after I left the Baptist Church, Calvinist Baptist Church, I said Christianity is a Mormonism who made it. They destroyed a lot of records. There were a lot of records that were lost or destroyed by the proto-Catholics. And so we just don't have the records of the development of Christianity. As a matter of fact, if you look, Jesus' death to the first writings of the, quote, church fathers like Clement of Rome or something like that, you have this gap of, 70, 80, 90 years. We just don't know. It's a dark age, really. We don't have any way to know what went on. We have the writings of the Apostle Paul, but really the amount of information we have about the Apostle Paul could be put on the back of a postcard. So we don't know much about these people. Peter.
What do you mean by on the back of a postcard? We have 7 authentic books, 6 or 7, 7, I believe. They believe are authentically Paul, and the others range from Paul influence to school of Paul, right? Like the pastorals are often thought to be school of maybe second generation or something. And that's all fine. The way I read it myself is it's in the canon, and so I grapple with it. I don't. So I'm volunteering in a Lukean way into a tradition where I'm just going to say, okay, it's in the canon. I'll respect the canon. That doesn't mean I can't integrate some modern scholarship into it and say, okay, I can see it. One thing with a possible theology that I think it's in Paul, 2nd chapter of Philippians. I think we get a picture of maybe how God is in the world. That is this idea. He's talking about Christ. Let your mind be like Christ, who comes down does not cling to power, but comes down and enters the world even to death. And I think that it's very possibly a picture of God in the world. It's very hard to explain the world of suffering and an all good, all loving, all powerful God. Christians do not like to grapple with that. No monotheists like to grapple with that, except for Luke. But I think it's very possible that a way of explaining this, and it's metaphor, so don't come down on me, people. Metaphorically speaking, why I think it's very possible God gave up being God to give us life in this world as we know it. And in a sense, God is buried in his creation and resurrecting through us and in us, and we are participating in that resurrection collectively as a whole, which would explain things like why we don't appreciate slavery anymore, why we see women differently than we used to, that we simultaneously we seem to be evolving in a universe of entropy. Where everything else wears out, we seem to be developing. So I wonder if perhaps we could look at God as in us, and we are realizing him if we give ourselves to that. If we live a life of narrow selfishness and ego, we will die a life that is narrow and ego-driven and full of loss and pain.
Yeah, I've appreciated the Buddhist tradition that about emphasizing that life is suffering, and I really appreciate that. Instead of life, as Nietzsche said, instead of emphasizing sin, Buddhism and that tradition emphasizes life as suffering. Okay, and you're suffering loss, you're suffering pain. Others are in pain, to try to alleviate, for me, that pain in my circle, or as much as I can. That's the summum bonum, right? I don't expect any reward. I think when you're dead, it's like when you go under general anesthesia. You just don't wake up. You just don't wake up.
The problem is that's as speculative as the other. Yeah,
we don't know. But I always liken it to general anesthesia. You're going to when I get a colon screening, like Mark, I hope you're getting. you're the right age. When you get a colon screening, they give you propanol.
Absolutely, yeah.
You don't know anything. Okay, and then you wake up and go, "When's you going to do it?" Well, it's done. Oh, really? This stuff's good stuff. This is good. No headache, no hangover. It's good. The thing is I think a strength of orthodoxy, and maybe someday Luke will join the Orthodox Church and become a member, is that the church interprets the Bible. They are the infallible interpreter of the Bible. That is the strength of orthodoxy and Catholicism.
I think you're speaking about the magisterium. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the church contains the magisterium, right? So the magisterial pronouncements in the councils and through the church fathers, the saints of the church, the doctors of the church, that interprets the scriptures. Otherwise, you got the position I came to, Mark and Luke, is the scriptures are self-contradictory. They're just contradiction. So you pick and choose parts of it and put it together, and voila, I have a systematic theology. It could be Calvinism, it could be Arminianism, it could be provisionalism, it could be dispensationalism, it could be whatever. Or what that fellow that's the Unitarian guy, whatever he came up with.
Sam?
Modalism, Sabellianism, I don't know. So you pick out the scriptures. It's like a canon within a canon. Okay. Luther didn't like the book of James. He wanted to get rid of the book of James. He wanted to get it out of the canon. So people pick things they like, and
they do that because they're trying to address their needs in this life and get cut through the cacophony of noise that is life period, but also life in Christianity. All religions seem to be really good at. This is when we started out talking to Luke. I said, I don't know if I can call myself a monotheist because it makes me. Monotheists love to make a lot of noise, and they like to plant flags and say this is what is truth.
Yes, that's true.
And
that's correct. Historically,
it's true, and it seems that it's a feature of Western culture in general. Maybe it's a feature of human culture, very possibly.
Well, the history of Islam in India is quite a history. So you can see the imposition of monotheism in living color, so to speak. So
it's something terrible. So people pick and choose to try to just get through it. Because what they really want is relationship to the life-giving force that they've had some kind of some little bits and pieces of an experience with that is transcendent. and they put up with a lot of shit in their religious traditions and their local churches that keep that. And they find it in their communities, and they find it in their families, and they find it in the processes that make these experiences with our families and our community sacred. It's a grossly imperfect process that I wish we could make better, but it is what it is. I just, for myself, I've never been able to stick the landing on the atheist path. It's not. I understand.
It's not for everybody. It can be very. It doesn't offer any comfort. Okay.
Well, it just falls apart for me. There's comfort. Just too little. It explains too little for my.
Yeah. Well, that's. I think that's legitimate. I think.
Well, that goes with McMo had a question earlier of like, would believing in God make you happy?
Yeah, but I don't. I think that's a trap because
it doesn't have to be a trap. It's just a simple question.
It could be because that. See, I see that, and I don't want to sound like a Marxist or anything, but I see that as a tool of exploitation for people. In other words,
what being that it's an ambiguous
believing something that's unevidenced or there's a lot of contrary evidence because it makes you feel good, it makes you feel nice, and I see that as.
Don't you think there's a lot of people who believe in God who wish they didn't?
I've never met anybody like that.
I mean, I think there's a lot of. I mean, the religious. I mean, I don't want to out certain people, but there's people I know in my family who believe in a God who I think they're absolutely terrified of. And the only reason they maybe don't is because they think they're just in his arbitrary good graces for some reason that they can't control or name. And that's very terrifying to them.
Well, they should be terrified because if you have some being that's running the universe and you have no idea what the rules are or what this being is going to do, that's a very terrifying thing, I think. That's one of the reasons I rejected Calvinism is because.
Don't you think that'd be the same thing as atheism? I mean, you can't.
Well, Calvinism, you can't really tell the difference between the devil and God, right?
I mean, I would agree with that, but even at that,
the devil's not as powerful. That's all. So,
but as a physicalist, you can't control. There are no rules. I mean, you can't control anything. Like an earthquake could just happen and you're dead, or this tragedy could strike you.
There is a radical uncertainty to life. All you can do is minimize risk. You can't ever avoid it. I'm 70 years old. You know how many people in my high school are dead that I graduated with? Yeah. Some of them died in prison. Some of them died in plane crashes. A friend of mine, my best friend in high school, he died in a head-on collision with a drunk driver. Yeah, there's a lot of radical uncertainty in life. That's why you have to enjoy life and be good to people while you can. That's kind of my thing. Because you don't know what'll happen. My wife and I were gonna go on a big trip for our big anniversary, and she planned it all out for a year, and then she got cancer and died. Mm. So I mean, there's a lot of radical uncertainties. That's why I am sympathetic to people who are religious. It's just that, what is the cost? What? As long as there's no huge epistemic cost where you stop going to doctors or you are tithing outrageous amounts of money to some hokey preacher or something, I suppose it's fine. But I want to defend the best thing, to the best of our knowledge, is true and accurate. I don't think that the universe, for example, Luke, is a scary place under physicalism compared to a lot of forms of theism. Because in some forms of theism, you could suffer your whole life and then die and suffer the eternal flames of hellfire. Okay. So that's pretty scary. Like these Jewish folks that died in the Holocaust, you know, when I was a Calvinist, they said, well, those people all went to hell. I mean, think about that. That's horrible. That's a horrible thing. It's terrible. But I believe that crap. That's what's crazy.
Well, this is where, so like for me, I mean, I'll just speak for myself. I don't, and this is hard to talk about because I don't really, Rogan said as much in this clip too later on, and that when I was talking about earlier, when he was talking about his belief in a soul and God, his understanding of God and those things, and he was saying, and then there are the police. He spoke about dogma in a way that I thought was very helpful because he said there are people you'll meet who will tell you like essentially what happens after you die or like what it's all about. And he's like, and those people don't know. He's like, of course they don't know, and so that's just a lie. And I would agree. Like I don't. Because I've often said before, I think, because I mean, I identify as a Christian, obviously, and I'll say things like that. I think modern day Christians understand the second coming about as well as first century Christians understood the incarnation.
Well,
I don't think we really understand this stuff very well. And like what happens when we die, I have no idea. I mean, I have thoughts about it. I have hopes about it. I think eventually everything will be made right. But again, like, I think a lot of that has to do with your orientation to.
Well, I'm very sympathetic to your universalistic Christianity. I think that it's a much more humane, view of an all-loving God. The Mormons are kind of universalists. Almost nobody is going to be lost. You just have to go after we're dead. You and I, all of us will go to Mormon concentration camp for a couple of 1,000 years and get instructed. And then we'll make it into the celestial kingdom. Now, we won't have any genitalia.
Oh, so we won't be able to enjoy our wives.
We're not going to be in hell. See? You don't believe that?
I do appreciate what you're saying. I mean, there is so much nonsense. For whatever reason, people develop these ideas and sign up. And why we do it is complicated. But
I think we know why Joseph Smith did it. I think we know we can kind of suss that out. I mean,
young white man and horny, right?
And Joseph Smith grew very rich too. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Yes.
He didn't live long enough to enjoy it. It sounds like.
No, because when you pull hijinks like that on the American frontier, it upsets people, and they didn't call the police.
But the funny thing is whatever the monster who built it, I know some really good people in that space, and that's what that to me is the that without sounding cliche. That's the miracle. That's the thing that is like. Wow, true. That's the dazzling part.
That is true. That is true. I think they're better than their religion. Mm-hmm. They're better.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm going to ask you two guys, since you guys are in the Christian space. Do you think Christians are any better morally than non-Christians? Do you look at them and say, "Wow, they're so much better than"? Other people.
Well, I think a lot of that comes with one of my greatest criticisms of confessionalism and identitarianism and self-identity is that it's the whole question of what is a Christian. And I do not think being a Christian is self-identifying as one. So that's probably the first
There's something to that.
So that's probably the first thing.
By your fruits you shall know them, right?
Right. And even if you break down the New Testament, like we're saved, are being saved,
we're
will
good,
be saved.
And they're bad.
All these different tenses are
right.
So like as an Orthodox, or I've even heard someone, who was it? There was some saint, or maybe actually it was Maya Angelou. who was asked like about being a Christian or something, and she said, basically, like, I hope to be. And so,
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's just a caveat for the self-identity thing. But then probably beyond that, I would say, I don't know. The true Christians would be those who imitate Christ. And what does it mean to imitate Christ? I would say to voluntarily give up of yourself unto death. So like Chezi was saying earlier, like the zitzum of God, the pouring out, the emptying, self-emptying of God to create space for being.
Right.
And I said to them privately earlier that I think from a Christian perspective, Christ is the zitzum of humanity. And so I think, so if you say all that, irregardless of how you self-identify and what you say with your words, what is a Christian? Well, it's somebody who embodies Christ to the world. And so I think you're going to find that in and outside of self-profession.
I appreciate that answer. That's very. I'm gonna have to think on that one. But what about you, Mark?
I'd say absolutely not. Christians aren't necessarily better. I don't think we come to it for that reason. I don't know if you've done any Alan Watts reading or listening.
I love Alan Watts. I love his voice. He's got the world's greatest voice.
To speak like Alan Watts.
Oh my gosh! If I could speak like Alan Watts, you
have to be British.
I'd be bigger than Joel Osteen.
Oh my gosh! It's magical.
It's like writing like Ram Dass.
Yes, exactly. I got
a halo over my head here. See that? It's a sign.
There you
go. Now I lost the train of my thought of my answer. The Christians, Christians are better.
Luke, Christians, if I'm ruining your stream, let me know.
No, you're good.
No. This is great. This is great.
I do that.
One, it's a chance to be honest, because we can get a little too self-affirming in this space. So it's good to have more people who are willing to push us. Because an echo chambers are poisonous.
I'll take you guys over the fanatic that I was any day of the week. Okay.
So you're converted fanatic. That's good.
I was a hardcore Christian Reconstructionist, man.
Okay.
I met a lot of these guys, Rush Dooney and these crazy people. All right. So, yeah.
What broke it for you? T-Grog?
What happened was there was a friend of mine who I met. I had some friends in Houston, Texas. I had a friend who was a medical physicist at MD Anderson Hospital. And one of his friends became a Quaker. She took a New Testament studies class and she became a Quaker. And to me, that's like apostasy. You might as well become a voodoo priest or something. A Quaker? What? So I started reading books on the New Testament, not from Josh McDowell's perspective, and I started reading books on the New Testament, and I go, wow, that explains why people can't agree on any of this stuff. Infant baptism, believer baptism, the gifts of the Holy Spirit, the work of the Holy Spirit, sanctification, justification, blah, 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 blah. Well, there are different conflicting theologies within the New Testament, okay? And they don't mesh very well.
Is there, or are there conflicting interpretations?
Well, yeah, that's why you go back to Orthodoxy or the pre-Vatican II Roman Catholic Church. The church is, Peter's given the keys. It's hierarchical. It's top down.
So interesting little aside.
Yes,
to
sir.
that point, who said this recently? It came up in a conversation. Shoot, who was it? And I commented on it. But someone was saying they heard, it was Richard Rowland when in his talk with Paul that just dropped. It was in the members only section for a while.
Right.
But he was talking about how there was some recent document that came out of the Vatican.
Right.
So it's not like speaking ex cathedra or something, but
Right.
it was saying essentially that that maybe that point, like that some of the papal stuff, like the first among equals, that the Catholic Church had maybe got that wrong.
Right.
That like the West was wrong in that understanding, because that's always been the East understanding, is that it's first among equals, but not that you can speak univocally and unilaterally in spite of all the other bishops. Anyhow, that's a little aside.
That's a huge argument. That's a huge argument, which I find fascinating, as I do all things in intellectual history. I watch a lot of Christian content, and one of my favorite guys are the guys over at Vatican Catholic. They're sedevacantists, and they go through in depth all this of the Trinity, the filioque, papal primacy of jurisdiction, this, that, and they just do a masterful job laying out the old-timey Catholic position, right? So yeah, it's fascinating. I would say, like Mark, when you brought up the 7 authentic Pauline epistles, that's a product of the Enlightenment. People accepted 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. Oh, Paul wrote all that stuff. Then roll up the Enlightenment. People start looking at these texts critically. They say, wait a minute, the vocabulary here is all screwed up. These ideas are not from the 1st century, they're from the 2nd century. That's all Enlightenment stuff.
Or explicitly Protestant. It's Protestants begin with as soon as right from Erasmus on, they begin this process of trying to build a better Bible, essentially, where it becomes a mission of theirs to get a quote proper text and a proper interpretation or translation.
I think you're right about that.
But it really takes off in the Enlightenment, no question.
Yeah, I would say this, like the guy, the author in They Flew, Erie or something like that.
Erie, yeah.
He's a great writer too. I'm going to buy this book, I'm going to sit there and read it. It's going to be horrible. It's going to be very depressing, because who really believes that St. Alphonsus Liguori intercepted B whatever bombers over Italy, flying at 10,000 feet. He's flying around up in the air, and he waves the bombers off so they don't bomb his monastery or something. Who believes that?
Hey, how's it going?
It's like remember the movie, the show The Flying Nun? That was really a documentary. It was a show.
Well, the thing that I find, I don't necessarily buy it, the idea that they flew. All right, I'm not into levitating saints, but the fact that he what he does though is he applies. This is a world-class historian applying the historical method to a subject that's considered ahistorical, and I think that process alone makes him worth reading.
Yes.
And you don't have to. You can hold it really lightly. Read his work. It is fascinating that it's so well documented, and his point. I think he lands his point. Do I still walk away? Am I convinced that there were ever any levitating saints? No, I'm not really convinced. But again, it's back to the Piraha and the Amazon and me in this world.
Right.
They see things that I can't see, and I see things they can't. And wherever the twain shall meet, in the end, it's something of a mystery to me. He's proven his point. He's proven his point.
Okay. Hey, Ron.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Welcome.
Hey, Ron.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad. What brings you on today? Welcome.
I just think this conversation is really fascinating. But I do have a question for y'all. So I would still say I'm a Christian. I've been toying around with openly saying I'm a fundamentalist Baptist, but I know that it's kind of a cringy thing to say.
That's okay. You can say it from me.
No, it's totally fine. So quick,
Neo cringe. All right, we're working. We're pushing the edge in the corner.
A quick aside. So one of my favorite people in the corner that I've tried to push forever is Peter Rollins, who he tells where his new book that's coming out is called The Unknowing God. Nothing can save us, I think.
Whoa, for a Baptist to say that?
No, it's not. He's not a Baptist. He was an atheist for a long time. I think he was converted, like kind of fundamentalist, and then he became kind of a mystic. He wrote this book called How Not to Speak of God, and he tells a parable. I'll find it somewhere and try to share it with you somehow. But he says, I'll try to remember the parable. Here, I'll tell it to you because it's a point about being a fundamentalist that I find interesting because I really like Peter Rollins. And he says, sorry, somebody pulled up outside of my house, and I'm just like, who are you? What's going on?
Don't look empirically there, Luke. You can't judge that way.
Oh,
you know,
they're wanting to get rid of they maybe want to take the desk that I set out there.
How do you know that? You know, you're with your eyes. I mean,
okay, so the parable. Let me try to think of it. So he says, so a mystic and a Baptist, I think, and a fundamentalist all die and they go to heaven, and they have to, and they all have this, St. Peter's there, and they have to go through and have this interview with Jesus before they get in. And so, I think the Baptist goes in first, and like, it's a pretty long conversation, and like, he comes out and he says, man, I was right about some things and I was wrong about some things. And wow, that's just, that's kind of amazing. And, he says, go on in. And the mystic goes in, and it's a pretty short conversation. And he comes back out after a while and he says, I knew I was wrong about everything, and then the fundamentalist goes in there and, it's a long time. And like, you hear some shouting every once in a while. And then all of a sudden at the end, like, Jesus comes running out and says, how could I have been so wrong?
I like that. That's good.
And so this is like a parable that Peter Rollins tells in his first book, except here's the thing with the spiral of how he's changed. And I need to read his new book. Peter Rollins is one of those guys where I'm just like, he's always like, I've learned a lot from him, but he's always like, he's cutting edge. He's like Vanguard. He's always ahead of me, I think. And he said, when he first wrote his first book, How Not to Speak of God, he was very much within the camp of the mystic. I thought the mystic was right. Mm-hmm. And he said where he's come now is like he's much more in the camp of the fundamentalist.
Uh-oh.
And so it's an interesting thing. And I don't think he means it in the way that like simplistic fundamentalism means it. He means it in some sort of different way, and I don't quite understand what he's talking about.
So now I want to know what Aaron is thinking.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I guess the fundamentalist in the sense that, Christ is fundamental. So pretty simple.
Yeah.
But I was actually thinking more as far as I used to really like the wooey stuff, and a part of me still does. But I think probably the thing I know about the most about God is probably the Holy Spirit, and not in a sense that, a lot of people try to find a way for him to connect to us. So they're always saying, prophecy or I feel him here and stuff like that. But I think for me, it's more of like moralistic. Like this side of morals has moral life in it and this side doesn't. And so you could argue that that's the Holy Spirit moving in our world, especially since that sin means like a mistake. Which I didn't know that for like the longest time until like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Christ forgives us of our mistakes. And if we live a certain way, they're full of mistakes, and we're not righteous because you're not inherently free of mistakes. But I feel like certain ideologies, like I guess the progressive ones are in some sense pretty good because they're trying to overcome the concept of these mistakes and try to get closer and closer. And I guess as a conservative, you're trying to hold on to something specific. But I guess from a far right perspective, it's like, it's very Nietzschean, where you feel like you can create your own way. And I feel like the argument of like a Holy Spirit is to basically say, you can't create your own way. You know, you can't decide what is moral or not. And that there's certain life to certain beliefs, and there's certain unlife, you know, to a lot of beliefs. And I feel like that's kind of where I've been kind of leaning on as far as spirituality, more so than, you know, flying nuns.
Could I ask you a question?
Yeah, definitely.
Is not hitting the bullseye every time a mistake?
Probably.
So you're made to hit the bullseye every time? Like if you're target shooting or you're playing darts,
Yeah.
is that the point of the game, to hit the bullseye every time? Perfect bullseye every time?
I don't know.
Because the word sin, whether we don't, our English word is different, but the idea in the Bible is rooted in sling shooting, as I understand it, or archery.
Yeah.
And you miss the target, and that would be a sin. Anybody can correct me if they're wrong in the comments or come on or whatever. That's fine. That's how I've understood it for quite a while. And it seems to me that a mistake, I think of a mistake, well, you have small mistakes and you have big mistakes. But imperfections don't strike me as necessarily mistakes, or a mistake that will, when you think of sin in theology, the way it's treated in theology, there are mistakes that condemn you, that damn you, that require that ruin you forever and all eternity and require salvation. And I wonder if that's not a wrong way of approaching. If that's wrong, if that's not, there might be a better way of looking at it.
Probably.
So yeah.
Because I mean, I would say that I really like the Orthodox. I really like Orthodoxy actually a lot. I like the concept of theosis, and I like the monarchical Trinity a lot. Where it's like, you know, God is perfect. You know, there's a perfection, and we try our best to be more like Him, and He's like the embodiment of that. But you know, all we have to do is really try to, you know, fulfill that, instead of, like, you can't ever be a perfect archer, but you can, you know, not give up. And maybe there's something to that, where it's more about not being a perfect guy, because you can't be perfect, but, you know, keep.
Well, couldn't you even say that trying to be perfect would be a mistake? In other words, trying to be sinless is sin.
Yeah, I guess so. If you're like saying that you can, like, you know, I can, I'm taking on God's challenge and I'm going to be perfect like Him. I think that's a mistake, because you can't be perfect. But to be like someone, I don't think is a mistake. You know, does that make sense, or am I kind of like logically
trying to be like Christ? You're saying?
Yeah, like you can't be like Him, but even like whatever the truth of, you know, the historical we have, it's like what we do know is we could, you know, is a lot. You know, we have the Sermon on the Mount, and we can believe that there's like the Holy Spirit is in that sermon, and you can't be perfect. I mean, I always feel like I forget everything the pastor said after church all the time. So I don't.
That's Satan.
I'm definitely not the guy, but
that's Satan doing that to you, man.
No kidding.
I don't believe in sin, man. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that concept. I think that's
I think there's human frailty.
That's how I look at it. And just from a different perspective, I think a lot of the strictures that Christ allegedly laid down in the Sermon on the Mount are nuts. They're crazy.
Really?
You really should read them. Don't worry about anything. God feeds the birds and the lilies and all that stuff.
You think that's crazy?
I think that's nuts. Crazy.
I think that's freedom.
I'm a fan.
Most birds during the winter, 50% or more starve to death. So God does not feed them. They have to try to scratch out an existence. Do not resist evil. Do not. That's crazy talk. I just don't. Nobody believes it because nobody does it. Nobody.
Well, because we all eventually die.
Huh?
But I feel like that's kind of also an issue I have, not really with God, but just in life you have to deal with. It's like, if you do what you're told, things go well, but that doesn't mean everything will go well.
I think from my perspective, Ron, I would just say this: treat other people the way you would ideally want to be treated yourself. Okay.
Right.
Be kind to people. You have to think these things through. You have to think through, you can't turn off your brain and just look at a book and it's supposed to give you the answers. Okay. You have to think about it. You have to, it's like, I used to have this very horrible view on homosexuality based upon the Bible, right? Mm. And I had a friend who was a Christian pastor who used to be a pastor in Greenwich Village, okay? And he said, if you think people choose to be gay, you're insane. That's ridiculous. Mm. You don't choose. He said, when did you choose to be a heterosexual? Did you wake up one morning and say, I don't know, should I be gay? Should I be a heterosexual? I don't know what to do. He said, it doesn't work like that. So I used to think it was a sin. It's a choice. Right. You're making a choice. And, now I think I'll be gay. It's wrong. It doesn't work like that. I've always been heterosexual from my littlest, when I was a little boy. I remember loving little girls.
Right.
So I didn't make a choice about it. It's not.
I've made a lot of choices to be heterosexual.
Well, you're the exception then. You're the exception.
I'll have to say my jokes.
I got a girl in pre-kindergarten. Okay, so take that for what it's worth. But I think a lot of these things people say are sinful, they're wicked. Treating other people like dirt, that's wicked.
Right.
And
I'm sorry.
I find some of the things in the Christian Bible lead to a lot of guilt, fear, like, I'm going to do the wrong thing. I might say the wrong thing. I might call somebody a fool. And according to Jesus, I should be thrown into hellfire for that.
Well, I think, Grog, a lot of that, and I relate to a lot of that, and a lot of that has to do with certain understandings of sin and damnation.
Right. Well, you're a universalist.
Huh?
You're a universalist, right?
Well, yeah, but a lot of that has to do with an understanding of sin and salvation, and tied up with exclusively moralistic and punitive legislative understandings of morality, when I think there are other ways to understand that, which I've learned from a lot of my Jewish friends. That is just not an understanding within Judaism, and I don't think it's an understanding within Orthodox Christianity either.
Yeah, I think there's a great amount of maturity that you have to have. Like, I'm also thinking about this kind of concept of logical conclusions. Like, if X is true, no matter what, you have to do X.
Right.
And I feel like that's such a trap for most people, because it leads into insanity pretty much, instead of having kind of meditating on, because sometimes I used to think that the Bible's very, I forgot the word, but basically doesn't make any sense. But if you take all these truisms, lack of a better word, and you just kind of jumble them in your head, you can kind of, I think, have a pretty decent worldview. You just can't take apart and follow that logically into its conclusion. Because, like you said, I mean, love your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and treat treat everybody like your neighbor, including your enemies. A thing that Paul says all the time. It's like you have to believe that and also be critical of these things. So you can't really, even if you don't approve of homosexuality, you can't hit them. Basically, like you have to just be like, well, that is what it is, and move on. And I think that took, honestly, a lot of maturity from a lot of people getting it wrong, and so much pain and suffering for people just, step back and be like, I, have more of an agnostic view of how we interpret things, and lead to our church fathers and all that, or priests. What do you guys think about that? I kind of talked a little too much.
I don't want to talk too much, but I do have a great Catholic joke when you guys.
All right, let's hear it.
Okay, Jesus is walking around heaven, and he looks over, and he goes, "What's that guy doing here?" He looks over there. "What is she doing here?" He's looking around. There's all these people, and he goes, "These people." So he goes to the heavenly, the pearly gates, and St. Peter's standing there. Forgive me, Luke. It's not Orthodox. St. Peter's standing there, and Jesus goes, "Hey, what's up? All these people are walking around here. What's happening?" He said, "Look, Jesus, I tell them no, and they go run back, and your mother lets them in."
That's one thing I've actually changed.
I missed that one. I was focused on something else for a second. I missed the punchline. I'm sorry. I can't multitask. Hopeless.
Yeah, Peter says to Jesus, they go around the back door, and your mother lets them in.
Oh, gotcha.
Your mother. Okay.
Thank you.
By the way, I think it's a brilliant thing that Orthodoxy and Catholicism have going for them.
Mm-hmm.
They've introduced the feminine into the quasi-divine realm. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just some wrathful, pissed off God like in the book of Revelation. Okay. It's this nurturant, loving, motherly figure, right?
Mm-hmm. Maybe you should join us up in Washington for the conference. There's going to be Michael Martin. He's a scholar on sophiology, and
no woo. He's not wooey at all. Just a lot of science.
He's actually really good. I don't know if he does or isn't have any woo, but he's
conference?
Good.
What is it?
Northwest Estuary. Yeah, everybody's. It's gonna be the whole scene, man.
North Estuary. I'll find a link and put it.
Yeah, put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, it's not badly priced. It's a good panel. Paul PVK is going to be there. Hezi, no Hezi. I'm looking at Hezi's name. That's why I said Hezi. See, this is why I say I can't multitask.
It might be there. You never know.
Michael Martin. Help me out, guys. Who else? Martin Shaw.
Oh, Martin Shaw. He's a trip.
Yeah, it's going to be a good group. It's set up by Grail Country.
Christianity.
Yeah, Nate and Sherry are putting it together.
Oh, I'd be about as welcome there as.
Oh no, you'd be ready, more than welcome.
Virgin Mary in a whorehouse.
I think it'd make it would complete the picture.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, we've got Sherry.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good.
Ron, keep thinking, man. Just keep thinking. Think. Do your own thinking. Have the courage to use your intellect. That's an enlightenment value.
Yeah, I guess so.
I came to tell a Descartes joke.
You came to tell a joke?
A Descartes joke.
Descartes
joke. Descartes, great.
Yeah, because you told the Catholic joke, so I thought, well, let's tell a Descartes joke.
I can't think of another clean Catholic joke.
Okay, so Descartes was in a bar and had a couple drinks. Just kept sitting there looking a little sad. And the bartender said to him, "Would you like another?" And he said, I think not, and disappeared.
I think not. Oh, I see. Like not is a
I think not.
not is a double meaning. I like that. That's good. I like that.
And he disappeared.
I like
He
it.
said
I like that. Yeah.
I might be a little too dumb to understand that one.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I think therefore
Well,
I
he
am.
says,
I think not.
I think
I'm not.
therefore I am.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Disappears.
I'm trying to find the website, but that's funny. Sure, that's good.
See,
I think
Satan is
not.
blocking you from finding it.
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where I've been, because I've been all over. Like, I feel like I had a lobotomy almost with all the intellectual talk about just religion and politics, where I just don't really know anything besides what you kind of said of just trust God, but also love your neighbor as your.
Yeah, you can't go wrong. You'll live a much happier life if you just focus on bettering other people's lives. That's been my experience.
Yeah, I think that's probably key.
Because from my perspective, you have a very short window to help them. Very short.
Yeah.
And so if you can make their life better, that to me, that is my life. That means my life has meaning. If I can reduce human suffering, the people I love, their suffering, if I can help them, that's my life.
And do you think like that mentality is almost in a way non-optional? Like you can have the free will to do that, but
I have there's a great relief to having a clear conscience.
Yeah.
And not being burdened with remorse or guilt, or that's why I appreciate AA. Some of the people in this space are in AA, is they say, look, you can't carry around these resentments. You can't carry around these burdens of hurting people. You have to make amends. You have to do that. Otherwise, you're going to go back out. There's a lot of wisdom to that. And I don't think drinking or being an alcoholic is sinful. I don't think it's wickedness or any of all the other baggage that people lay on top of it. It's just very bad for you. It's bad for the people around you. It hurts people. And that's kind of the way I look at it. There's a lot of ethical issues I really don't know the answers to. But I don't think you're going to solve them by, mystical experiences. You have to think about it and put yourself in other people's shoes and kind of try and empathize with them.
Yeah.
And not everybody can do it. That's the sad part. Not everybody can do that. They just can't. They're just not capable of it, especially if they're using drugs.
But do you think that could be the mystical part?
I don't look. I thought about going on a magic mushroom trip. They have them in Oregon. They're not cheap, believe me.
Yeah.
Okay, but in Utah, you get caught with magic mushrooms. You might as well be caught with heroin.
Yeah.
Okay, they'll throw you up in the slammer and lock you up forever. So I don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
You go do ayahuasca in Central America safely. There's some.
I heard it makes you puke a lot.
Yeah, you gotta. It's a trial.
Yeah, I don't.
By the way, a correction. I was wrong about Shaw. Martin Shaw isn't coming. I was wrong about that. Chris Green.
Yeah, you were thinking Michael Martin, maybe.
Michael Martin probably, and then Chris Green.
Yeah.
I just got.
Martin Shaw is going.
Oh, suddenly he couldn't make it. We're so sorry.
Or wouldn't it be crazy if Jordan Peterson came too?
Martin Shaw's like Bigfoot. He just kind of shows up. I saw Martin Shaw.
If Jordan Peterson went to like one of the TLC events, it would completely ruin it. Like I don't think I ever want Jordan Peterson to come to a TLC event.
Why?
Post the link again for T-Grog so he can cut and paste it. Did you see it before it disappears, T-Grog?
Just like anything else, it's a mixed bag with Jordan. I mean, I think that the problem I have with him is I think a lot of fundamentalists hook onto him and they use it to retroject their fundamentalism into what he's saying, right? In other words, well, there are natural hierarchies, folks, so that therefore we got the men on top. Well, we got Jesus on top,
Right.
and we got men, and then women go lower, and then children. Everybody. It's a hierarchy. It's a natural hierarchy, folks. And I just
You don't think men are better than women?
no, I don't.
Wow.
Matter of fact, I think I'm old enough to say this. I think men and women are equally good or equally bad, depending on who you're talking to.
Well, do you think?
I don't know. I'm just looking at Risto's comment. The corner is anti-celebrity.
Anti-celebrity.
How is that possible if we want to include everyone? Like, how can you be anti-celebrity?
Right. I don't think
Popular.
the corner.
That's my question.
Well,
the
I
corner,
would,
yeah,
everyone's
the corner can
everyone's
be.
happy to include everyone,
Yeah.
except for these people.
Right.
Right there it is. There it is. It's always there.
Yeah.
In some form or another, and it's like just a form of self-righteousness.
It can be.
Yeah.
I'm just the thing that I have with it is I want to be all inclusive of everyone, and this is even like me talking about TLC versus Christian YouTube. Is that it's more about powers and principalities and spirits, and I think with somebody like Jordan Peterson, you're gonna get all sorts of sycophants and people that are following basically earthly hierarchies and politics that come along with it, and maybe that's
A lot of
fine.
right wingers. That's true.
I mean, I would want to embrace Jordan Peterson the person, but I don't necessarily want to embrace a lot of people that are idolizing him as like their hero in some zero-sum ideological enterprise.
I don't like gurus at all.
Yeah.
I don't like gurus.
But I agree with your point, Sherry. Like the TLC should not be anti-celebrity.
No,
Yeah,
I don't.
then
I think you're right,
well,
Sherry.
yeah.
I think
I
you're
mean,
right.
you just run into the judgment problem. So then, if you don't want to embrace somebody, then you have judged them, right? Like seriously, like I'm not trying to. I don't want to be, I'm not trying to.
Sherry, are you sick?
I understand what you say. Huh?
Are you in bed? Are you sick? Are you okay?
I'm in bed because I'm in Switzerland, and it's
how lovely!
It's midnight.
Lovely.
Yeah.
What part of Switzerland, may I ask?
I am on the Rhine between Germany's just across the river, and
I've been to Geneva. It's very nice.
It's I'm in the canton of Otto, sorry, Argo.
Nice.
Yeah, visiting my daughter.
So, is that where your people are from?
My husband is Swiss, and
Nice.
all my kids are in Germany and Switzerland. So
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Were they born in the U.S.? Or were they born over in the United States?
I'm Canadian.
Okay, all right.
There's another country in North America.
Yeah, see, there is another country somewhere here. Yes, I apologize.
Your American chauvinism is showing. Hold on.
Yeah, what can I say?
Got a 1% on my phone, so it's gonna die any second.
4th of July, right?
Ron, see you.
Good seeing you, Ron. Let's talk.
No, and my husband is Swiss, and my kids were born. Well, not my oldest daughter was born in Canada, but my other two were born here.
Nice.
We lived here for about 11 years. So, yeah, they all came back and found the loves of their lives and got married, had families.
That's lovely.
It is.
Makes it hard on mom, though. Mom has to.
I'm in an 800-year-old house in a medieval village on the Rhine right now, folks. So.
Well, that's nice, but it took you how many years? 5 years or something to get there because of COVID and everything else?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sucks, but it's good to.
I'm here now.
Good.
Yeah. Right.
Well, you're missed. We understand.
Yeah.
So when is this shindig, Luke? The big shindig.
So it is happening September 12th through 14th of this year in Olympia, Washington.
I may be in Houston celebrating my little sweet love's birthday, but if I can make it, I'll try to make it up there.
Well, that'd be cool.
That'd be great, T-Rob.
Yeah, I thought about going to Christian apologetics meetings, but
This
I
is
can't
better.
get anybody to go with me. So
What do you do at a Christian apologetics meeting?
I'm listening for anything. I'm hanging on by my fingernails here to see if there's anything there.
Just getting into fist fights.
The problem is I got a story about that, and I hope it's not blasphemous. Please stop me if it is. I had a friend of mine. He went to a church, Catholic church, in an Italian neighborhood in Cleveland, Ohio. That's where I grew up. And he decided to pull a stunt there. He took the host and he put it in his pocket. And he was confronted outside by a couple of guys with, he described as no necks. And he said, "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" They said, "We saw you put Jesus in your pocket and we want him back." So, and he gave him back. He gave it back. So,
yeah, that's a big deal. That's my understanding of in Orthodoxy. You have friendship bread because like after you take communion, there's bread and wine that you take afterwards. And my understanding of it is that that tradition evolved because people were smuggling out.
Well, you got that whole crazy tradition about the Jews desecrating the host during the Middle Ages, and they're crucifying it, and blood's coming out of it, and all these insane anti-Semitic tropes. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, but that happened 20 years ago, so it's not, yeah.
So Grog, I'm not Tim, right? Can I call it Tim? So I am curious, and maybe you don't remember because I'm probably going to wrap this up, at least for me, in a little bit.
No, that's fine. I got to go too.
No, but I'm curious as to how you came into the corner. Do you remember? Was it just random on the algorithm? What is the first thing you saw?
No, look, you're retired. You got to find something to do, right?
Yeah.
Now, I did edit a book that will be coming out. It's about miracles in the early church. And so I worked on that, and then I was just kind of knocking around.
You can't get enough of that stuff, hey?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think it's fascinating. As I pointed out to Paul Vanderklay, I said, it's very simple, Paul. If you actually are pushing this book, They Flew, these people are having these levitations right around the time of the Council of Trent. So the Christians, the Catholics at that time, argued. Catholic theologians said, look, Protestants, we have these miracles. What have you got? Nothing. So these miracles show that the teachings of the Council of Trent are true. They are from God. So I said, Paul, so you either don't believe these miracles happened, or you do believe they happened. If you believe they happened, it seems to indicate that the Catholic, the medieval, the early modern views of the Catholic Church are true. So why are you a Reformed pastor? You're teaching heresy that's sending people to hell, right? So it's very simple. It's very logical. So
what was the first corner video that you saw? Was it PVK or was it
probably PVK? Yeah, probably PVK. Because here's what happened. I when I was a young man, I wanted to be a missionary to the Mormon Church. I wanted to be a missionary to the Mormons. And I wanted to go to Westminster Theological Seminary. I wanted to be a gung-ho preacher boy. Thank goodness I didn't do that. But I wasn't that great at Greek. So I kind of got a C- in Greek, so I'm not a gifted linguist. So I've always been interested in Mormonism. I live in Utah, and a lot of the Mormons are whole hog on Jordan Peterson. They're completely, they think he's the greatest thing ever. I mean, he's spoken at the big conference center up in Salt Lake for the church. So they're like, whoa, wow, Jordan Peterson's great. And so that's how I got interested in it, because I'm kind of a, if something's popular, if something's very popular in the masses, I think it's wrong.
I tend to be that way too. So you, when you were young, you wanted to be a missionary to the Mormons,
right?
Because you're in Utah.
Well, I was in Ohio at the time, but I wanted to be a missionary, and what I did was, all I did is took the critical apparatus that I used, and Mark would appreciate this. The critical apparatus I used to deconstruct Mormonism, I applied to my own beliefs. In fairness, so there's no double standard. This is a contradiction in the Book of Mormon. What about this in the Bible? Joseph Smith prophesied the end of the world, and it didn't happen. That shows he's a false prophet. Jesus prophesied the end of the world, and it didn't happen. That shows he's a false prophet. So it's a fairness test. There's a label for it. It's called the outsider test for faith. In other words, examine somebody else's, your own faith with the same critical eye that you'd examine Islam, voodoo, Scientology. Use the same critical mind to look at what you think and see if it holds up.
So what time frames was this in your life? So I'm guessing when you want to be a missionary to the Mormons, that was early life.
Yeah, well, I was basically an extreme wacko fundamentalist Christian from 20 to 30.
Okay. And then you started being critical of your own faith around that time?
Yeah. And it was a number of things, but that was one of them, because I met with these Mormon missionaries and I said, look, Joseph Smith predicted the end of the world, and it just didn't happen. So then they start whipping out passages from Matthew and Luke, and they go, hey, Jesus predicted the end of the world. That didn't happen. And I go, what?
Yeah.
So I don't want to because you're so biased to your own views. You're so biased. Humans are so biased that I thought the only fair way to do it was to not special plead for my particular ideas, right? And to look at it critically. And also, there's a lot of other things. Luke, I don't have to tell you, you used to be an evangelical, I guess. Phony preachers, fake healings, greedy preachers, child molesting preachers. The morality of these people is a disaster.
I think that can be just like, I think you can spread that right across the board, though. Like,
that's true.
In society,
there are immoral people everywhere, like whether they're religious or not.
That's true.
This goes back. You guys were talking about missing the mark before, and Ron was saying something about mistakes, and I think I wrote in the chat something about sin is not a mistake. Like, it's not a mistake. It's a. I think it has to do with the idea in Judaism of God being hidden in creation. And so we're playing hide and seek, right, with God. And this is why God woos us like a lover to his beloved, which is what the Song of Songs is an example of. And so, because I think if you want to look at it from a very rational point of view, You cannot tell someone what they should think. They need to discover it, right? Like lights have to go on for people. Like any good therapist will not sit down with their client and tell them how to live. They will help them discover how to live.
Right.
And this is exactly what, you know, if we want to keep it in the Christian context, this is what God is doing, or in the Jewish context for that matter. God is helping us to discover what it means to choose life, right? And so he has to be hidden, because if we make it explicit, we won't be able to do it. It'll be too overwhelming. This is why God says you can't see my face, right? So like these are the layers that I think the way, and I haven't heard you have like long conversations very often. I listened to your conversation with Jacob, and listening to this, a little bit of this, I want to say this. I'm not very good at being thorough in the way I talk about these things.
By the way, Sherry, just to interject something here, I wish you were my grandma. You seem like a very nice person.
Well, if I was your,
I had a very nice grandma, and she probably saved my life. Okay. So I had a really crazy good grandma too, but
I'll take that as a compliment.
It is a compliment.
Like if you're looking at these things from a purely literal point of view, then they are absolutely crazy. But if you can understand that there are layers to these things, right? Like when Jesus says that the world is going to end, the world will end for all of us, right? We will all, and not only that, it will be apocalyptic when it happens, and it will happen more than once. Our worlds will end over and over and over again, and they will be revelatory. Every time our world ends, something new is revealed to us, right? Something old goes away and something new is revealed. And this is what a lot of the language of scripture or mythology is doing. It's talking in those terms, and the problem is people take them literally. That's the problem.
Yeah, I
would also add, though, on top of all that you could take them literally. You can. It's okay, right? Baby steps.
Yeah, I understand that perspective. Yeah, that's fine. I was
hoping you would.
Listen, I do have to go though, but it's been nice talking to you guys. And
well, Grog, yeah, let's Tim, let's wrap this up, and Sherry can get to bed, and then I'm so eager to hear the legit randos. Grog, you've been around enough. You're a member of the community. We need a randos. Just do it for the people. Good grief.
You mean a rando? You mean like just do a stream? Is that what you mean?
No, so like a randos. See, you're not initiated, my friend.
No, there's all this cultural language in this group. I don't understand.
So like
it's a combinatorial explosion, man. I don't get it.
It's a tell me your story.
Yeah, it's a tell me your story. So Mark, who's just here. So Mark, put your email in here real quick, because it was up. Well, it was up earlier when Mark was in here. You could just scroll back. He has his email in there. I can't remember what it is.
I'll take care of it. Yeah.
But it's kind of like a randos is. I think that is the beating heart of the TLC community, because there's the whole Jordan Peterson thing, Sphere, and then there's Vervaeke, and there's Peugeot, and then there's PVK. But something unique happened with PVK, where a community evolved that I think isn't just ideological. It's not just about ideas. It's not just an orthodoxy cult. although some people think it is sometimes. It's a group of people.
Ironic.
Huh?
I said that's ironic.
Well, to you, yeah, but it's a group.
Yeah, Paul's a Reformed minister. Orthodoxy, that's anathema.
Right, but that's what's so great. That's what's so great about Paul is he's happy about people pursuing orthodoxy. Paul, see, that's the thing is Paul understands, I think, the God of your own understanding thing. So, but that's an aside. I'm just the randos is like what Paul started doing that he's mentioned a lot of times on his channel, where people started contacting him after that initial Jordan Peterson video and wanted to talk to him, and then he eventually became a bottleneck, and so they started talking to each other. And that's how this community started. I mean, Sherry and I are like OGs. We've been involved since really early, way pre-Discord days. But it's the community of people that are surrounding him. And the randos is the conversation with PVK where he just goes through your story.
Yeah, I understand that, and I appreciate that. That's a great thing, I think. But the only cautionary I would have to something like that is when I was a Christian, I would say, oh, I've heard their story. So this is what's really happening. See?
Yeah,
I really have an objection. This is what happened. They were hurt.
Yes.
They had a problem. They couldn't get over it. See, it's the psychologizing and the psychoanalysis. Wow.
Yes. I would hope that people in this corner wouldn't do that.
Huh?
I would hope that people in this corner wouldn't. I mean, it's going to happen. Some people are going to do it.
Yeah.
But I would hope that people don't.
Yeah. I'm glad they don't write scientific papers like that. Well, tell us your whole story, and then we'll try and psychologize everything you say and discount everything.
Well, it's really unfortunate if somebody's really speaking from the heart and telling you their story, and then you use that in some kind of weird way to manipulate them or categorize them or explain them away. I don't know. It's really dehumanizing.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's why I object to it. I've never heard Paul actually tell his story.
I mean, well,
why does everybody tell him their story and he doesn't tell them their?
Oh, he has. He's told his story.
Yeah.
It gets lost in the content. He has so much content that it gets lost.
I'm probably wrong about that, but it's just an observation.
I think T. Grog, because most people who get into this corner, they're not too. Maybe I shouldn't say this.
I wish all Christians were like you guys.
Well, they're not. They're not super rational in the sense that they're not materialists. Most people. Well, I shouldn't say all people, because some people are. Some people are atheists. But there's a spirit here, and which kind of convinces me that they're not materialists, because they sense it, whether they would like to admit that or not.
Yeah.
And so
materialism could be false. I just don't see any evidence that it is false. That's all.
But when you do the randos, it's often, for most people listening, I think, it's often, it shows how miraculous people's lives actually are. How resilient.
They're strange. They're very strange. Look, you look back at your life. You're not as old as I am, Sherry. You look back at your life and the things that happened to you, the things that happened to you, you had nothing to do with.
Grandma threw me.
Huh?
I'm glad you said that I wasn't as old as you were, because the grandma comment really threw me there.
Well, you have children. I assume you have grandchildren, right?
I do. 5 of them.
Well, there you go. See?
Oh, yeah. I am a grandma.
I'm not holding my breath. But, yeah, I'm 70 years old, okay? So, if you look back at your life, people ask me, they go, well, how did you pick your wife? Pure luck. Pure luck. I was in the right place at the right time. I met the right girl, and boom.
Are you sure about that? Did you know? Okay, let me tell you this. This is science, okay? That we emit an odor that is undetectable, and it's not pheromone, okay? But And the odor that we emit from our bodies will attract someone to us. And what we're being attracted to is each other's immune systems.
My wife used to tell me that quite frequently. I love the way you smell. And I used to be called Stinky Grogan, Stinky Tim when I was in high school. I go, well, thank goodness you like the way I smell, because if you didn't, we'd be in trouble.
Oh,
So
I have
there you go.
asthma, so I can't wear all these deodorants.
Positive. Thank God you've had the experience. No, it's true. So that's actually science. So it's not just luck.
No, it's fair. No, there's a thing with the immune system. I agree with that. I think there's a good, from what little I know, there's a good empirical basis for that. It makes perfect sense, right?
Doesn't it? Though?
I just dropped crumbs, and she followed me, just crop dusting my way.
I think, Sherry, well, the study you're talking about, what they did was they took guys and they said, okay, wipe under your arms, and then they had women smell it, and they could pick who they'd be attracted to based on them liking the smell. It's crazy.
And then the question came up in the conversation that I watched about this years ago. What has deodorant done to the world?
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, now
And
that's an interesting question.
and deodorant plus the pill, because doesn't that do it?
So,
because women go off the pill, and then all of a sudden they're just like, I'm not attracted to you.
Yeah. Well, it can happen.
A lot
I
of
guess it can
mismatches.
happen.
Yeah. We're probably doomed.
Anyway, Luke.
All right.
Luke,
all right. Thanks, guys. Let you go.
Thanks for coming. All right. Peace out, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Tim.